Und bei uns geht es jetzt weiter mit der Frage Forever Young, für immer jung. Das ist das Thema unseres nächsten Vortrags und der spricht ein sehr virulentes Thema an, wie umgehen gerade mit Farbfotografien, die ja besonders gefährdet sind, die durch Licht, durch Bewegung im Laufe der Zeit ausbleichen, ihre Farbwerte verändern oder sogar ganz zerstört werden. In Museen und Sammlungen will man natürlich keine unperfekten, sondern makellose Fotografien zeigen. Und da ist natürlich die Frage, ob und wie diese Arbeiten neu produziert werden können, wer das letztendlich entscheidet und was so eine Reproduktion aber auch bedeutet. Dr. Monika Marchesi ist ausgebildete Papierrestauratorin und Kunsthistorikerin. Seit 2006 arbeitet sie als Restauratorin am niederländischen Stedelijk Museum, hat bereits vor 10 Jahren ein Forschungsprojekt zur Frage, wie man fotografische Kunstwerke für die Zukunft sichert, initiiert, bei dem eben das Stedelijk und die Universität Leiden kooperiert haben. Und in diesem Zusammenhang ist auch ihre Dissertation entstanden, Forever Young, The Reproduction of Photographic Artwork as a Conservation Strategy. Ihren Vortrag hat sie auch als Einspieler vorbereitet und wird uns dann danach im Chat für Ihre Fragen, die Sie gerne uns schicken können, zur Verfügung stehen. Und jetzt erstmal Monika Marchesi.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Monica Marchesi, and it's an honor for me to be here. It is a pity that we are not able to meet in person, but we are fortunate enough that we can rely on digital technique, and that we are still able to have engaging discussion through an online symposium. To avoid possible internet issue, I pre-recorded my talk. At the end of the registration, I will be live to answer a question if there are any. But before moving on, I would like to express my gratitude to the organization and especially to Gabrielle Conrad School for the invitation and the opportunity given me to present this paper today. In my professional life, I came across different types of reprinting for modern and contemporary art photography. In this talk, I described 3 different sorts of reprinting. Each kind has distinctive origins, specific characteristics, and the expectation that we have about these processes are also different. I will mainly focus on how artists and museums regard reprinted photographic artwork and possible changes in status. Most of the examples presented today are cases that I've encountered and dealt with during my daily practice as a conservator at the Stedelijk Museum in Amsterdam. In my experience, you can make a distinction among reproduction intended as a substitution and a replacement of photographic artwork. This practice is started to counteract unwanted changes to the initial print after a certain period, and it is an artist-driven process most of the time. I will speak further in more detail about this group later on in this talk. A second group is the reprinting of exhibition copies. This is a museum-driven process most of the time. It is often adopted to avoid restriction such as tight-alight policy, which is a common procedure in museums nowadays. The reprinting of exhibition copies enables museums to display photographic prints for a longer period. It also permits collecting institutions to depart from a museum-like presentation, allowing them a more casual display. What you see in this slide are 2 exhibition copies of 2 photographs by the Russian photographer Boris Mikhailov during the exhibition of the Dutch photographer Bertien van Manen at the Stedelijk in 2020. In previous years, the 2 chromogenic prints in the museum collection had been exhibited various times. An extra display would imply too much exposure to light and thus possibly an accelerated color fading. The curator considered the 2 works by Mikhailov essential for the exhibition. Consequently, she decided to contact the artist and asked if he would agree with printing exhibition copies, which he did, and he sent the unframed prints to the museum. In the gallery, they were hung directly on the wall with pushpins and without glazing to protect them, and the label mentioned their state of exhibition copies. And here, what you see here are one of the two exhibition copies presented directly on the wall without any glazing, any other protection. At the end of the show, the two copies with the artist's consent were added to the museum collection under the title of exhibition materials. The status of these prints is clear from the beginning, as they will not substitute and replace the photographic prints regarded by the artist and the museum as the artworks. According to the curator, the different status would give the museum more freedom in displaying Michaelis' work in the future. A third group is the reprinting of what I call documentary copies. Also, this is a museum-driven process most of the time. For this group, the freedom in presentation is even larger than the other two. The photographic print can be enlarged, become a blow-up, and turn into a wallpaper, as revealed by this example. The silver gelatin print showing the French artist Yves Klein jumping into the void is 35 by 27 centimeters. As you can see in this slide, the black and white photograph with original dimension is presented in a frame next to other works by Klein. And here I try to make it clear by putting this arrow. In this slide, the image is presented as an exhibition prop. This copy doesn't have any correlation with the photograph part of the museum collection. The only element in common between the two prints is the image. The presentation, the size, the printing technique, and the material used is overall different. The use and the status of the documentary copies are well known since the beginning. These copies were never produced with the intent to substitute and replace the artwork, and they will never do. The first case studies that I present now are coming from my doctoral research. They all deal with reproduction intended as a substitution and the replacement of photographic artwork. I will finish the presentation with a short mention of my latest research on the German artist Wolfgang Tillmans. If you are interested to read a little bit more about the three cases that I'm presenting, you can read my thesis, which is available free on the internet, and these are the website addresses where you can find the thesis. But let's start with the first case study, which is Comet C 3 to 60 degree by the Dutch artist Jan Dibbets. Because of the dramatic fading, the artist made clear to the Stedelijk Museum his wish to reproduce his work and convince the staff about its necessity. This occurred twice, in 1996 and in 2012. From a material point of view, all the three versions differed, and what you see here is one of the parts, part 3, and printed in 1973, the one in 1996, and I've put here the specification of the materials used, if they are known, and what you see here is the 2012 print, the same part. And for your understanding, I put the same print on top of each other, but this is the 1973, the 1996, and the 2012. And what you clearly see is that the 1973 is really yellowed, and the 1996 has a more reddish magenta tone on the whole surface. Also, the dry transfer letters changed every time in every version. So each part has the application of a dry transfer letters. And as you can see, there are small changes in the font and in the size. So, and where known, I put the different the specification of the letters that have been used. Also, the photographic images also slightly changed to overcome mold staining in the original negatives. Please look at the sea waves at the corner. The version of 1996 misses a part of the waves, and in 2012, in the 2012 version, the waves have a slightly different shape. So, what I mean here is that in 1996, in this corner, there are no waves. In 2012, they are back again, as in 1973, but the length of the wave is shorter in comparison with the 1973. And what you see in this slide is where two of these prints in their totality, the 1996 and the 1973. But also what you see maybe faintly is that in the 1973 there are some clouds which are disappeared in the 1996 version. The artist and the empowered decision makers at the State Museum considered the change in the materials and the alteration of the images acceptable. I suspect because the changes were limited in size and only visible at a very close examination. The second case study deals with the reproduction of La 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 Light by the Dutch artist Gerald van der Kaap. In 2011, van der Kaap made clear that the piece could not be displayed in its damaged state. Due to a technical failure, the face mounting was detaching from the photographic surface underneath. This resulted in gray stains along the edge, as you can see in this slide. And these are the detaching areas that look like stains, and this is more or less the position of the detaching on the work. For van der Kaap, this damage was slim disturbing, and it prevented the correct reading of the artwork in his eyes. As the failure could not be resolved or mitigated by any kind of treatment, the only approach to reinstate a faultless condition was to reproduce the work. In this case, it became clear that the correspondence of the material and the photographic process would not be possible, as the availability of materials is dictated by the evolution of the industry and the photographic market. In 1990, van der Kaap printed the work as a silver-dyed bleach photograph. In 2012, he had turned to the chromogenic process as the manufacture of silver-dyed bleach paper had stopped. However, this change also had an effect of the appearance of the work. At the end, given the chance, van der Kaap, rather than mimic the appearance of the first version, with a low resolution, decided to increase the image sharpness and color intensity, as this turned to be possible because of technological developments of the last 20 years. The third and last case deals with the work Virtues and Vices for Giotto by the American artist John Baldessari. 14 black and white photographs printed on Barata paper form the work. The work is part of the collection of the Van Abbe Museum in Eindhoven, also in the Netherlands. The third case deals with the work of Virtues and Vices for Giotto by the American artist John Baldessari. 14 black and white photographs printed on Barata paper form the work. The work is part of the collection of the Van Abbe Museum in Eindhoven, also in the Netherlands. What makes this case extremely interesting is the fact that the reproduction was a museum-driven process rather than being an artist-driven one, as the other two examples. It was the curator of the Van Abbe Museum who actively approached the artist and asked him about the possibility to reproduce the work, as this had suffered mechanical damage during the display. Because of financial constraints, it was agreed that Baldessari would print a new set of photographs in Los Angeles, his home base, directly from the negatives and without comparison to the first set of photographs. This aspect turned out to be disappointing. This aspect turned out to be key to the disappointing outcome of the reproduction process. Because of differences in image magnification in the texture of the photographic paper and in the image tonality as shown in this slide, the curator of the museum refused to accept the reprinted version as an acceptable substitution of the work. He and other curators after him prefer to keep in the collection the damaged version rather than the new pristine one. The differences were subtle but visible enough to decide against the new version. And what I mean about the differences in image magnification is this is the 1981 version and this is the 1992. And what you see here is the cropping line. So this is the line that should be cut. You see here that the distance between the cropping line and the head of the man is like this, which while in the first version it's there is no distance between the head and the cropping line. And here I try to make the detail of the eye of the man, and as perhaps you can see faintly the texture of the paper in this in the 1981 version, and as well the differences in tonality. The tonality here it's a little warmer, and this is a colder bluish. Baldassare was keen to reprint the work a third time, but because of technological changes in the meantime, he suggested digitizing the negatives, adding the text to the digital files, and making inkjet prints from those. The curatorial staff refused this last proposal and they decided to discontinue the reproduction process. In the first version, you have dry transfer letters that are applied on the photographic surface. And this is the second version without the dry transfer letters. But Baldassare, in his idea of reprinting a third time, he wanted to have the letters not applied on top, but part of the digital file and then printed as an inkjet altogether. And that was a little bit too much for the museum, and that is the reason why they decided to discontinue the reproduction process. What the three instances clearly show is that many unforeseen circumstances may occur. Thus, the process may often diverge from the expectation that the various stakeholders have at the beginning. In my experience, keeping the image as it was is the leading principle in the process. If you ask artists and curators what should be kept intact in the second version of the work, most of them they will answer the image. In reality, though, small changes may occur as demonstrated in David's case, and the use of different technique is somehow more accepted, as shown by the Van der Kaap's example. However, in Baldassare's case, what is important to preserve changed over time. A difference in technique was considered a bridge too far by the empowered museum staff. When the second version should look as close as possible to the first version, a comparison of the two is often necessary. Van der Kaap requested halfway through the reproduction process the shipping of La 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 Light to Germany. At first, Van der Kaap thought he could reproduce the work without comparing the two versions. Halfway through the process, he realized that he would need the first version at the photo lab, which was in Germany, to compare and calibrate the colors. He requested, therefore, the shipping of the work, which the museum did. In Baldassare's case, the artist printed the second set of photographs without comparison. This course of events resulted in the disappointing outcome for the museum. These three instances also reveal how changes in status are often not formalized and they differ on a case-by-case level. On the one hand, these changes often rest on the personal artistic view of each artist. On the other hand, a positive or very negative outcome of the reproduction process may also influence the status changes. In Dibit's case, the change in status remained undefined. Dibitz views Comet C as a conceptual work, and he sees similarities with instruction pieces such as Solowit's reenactment of wool drawings. For Dibitz, the color-faded first version continues to be the original artwork. Even if it cannot be presented in public anymore. The status of the second version is unclear. Dibitz doesn't allow its display anymore, but to him it doesn't stand at the same level as the first version. The third set of prints is at the moment the only one that is allowed to be hung in the museum gallery. The artist demanded that when displayed, the third version of Comet C should bear only the date of the artwork's creation, which is 1973, but there should not be any mention of the printing date of 2012. In this case, the status of 1996 and 2012 remains therefore undefined and lingers between a genuine substitution of the work and an exhibition copy. In the case of La 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 Light, the label should report the date of the first creation, as well as the moment of the second manufacture. Van der Kaap considered his involvement in the reproduction and the changes made in the second version a valid reason to mention 2012 as a part of the work's creative process. By adding the year 2012, Van der Kaap acknowledged the making moment of the second version as a significant event in the work's life. For the artist, the first version of La 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 Light still fulfills an important function, even if the work should no longer be put on display. This version retained a reference role for possible new version in the future, and therefore worthy of being preserved in the museum repository. The 2012 version of La 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 Light substituted and replaced in 1981. The first version moved from having the status of artwork and became a reference piece. In Baldassarre's case, the new reprinted photograph never reached the status of a genuine substitution of the first version. The second set of prints was never fully completed, as the cropping of the photograph edges and the addition of the text were never realized. The refused prints have been kept ever since in the Van Abbe Museum as archival documents. I will continue with a short mention of Wolfgang Tillmans' artistic practice. In Tillmans' case, the substitutive practice is well defined from the start. For his large unframed inkjets, Tillmans has incorporated the possibility to reprint them when damage may occur. In the certificate of authenticity that comes along with the work, the artist states that the artwork consists of 4 elements. First, 1. The large format unframed inkjet. 2. The reference print. 3. A digital file of the image kept on the storage device. 4. The certificate instructing the owner how to reprint the picture when the large format inkjet is damaged. This artistic practice is particularly interesting and remarkable as the substitution and the replacement between the two versions of the large format inkjets is definitive. When the reprinting has occurred, Tillmans demands the physical destruction of the older version. In this case, there is no way back, and therefore there are no uncertainties about the status of the first version, as this ceases to exist. To conclude, some final remarks. Reproduction doesn't only substitute and physically replace one version with another, it's also a subtractive and additive process in which materials' characteristics are altered, some aspects are repeated, others are omitted, and new features are introduced, as the case studies have revealed. Reproduction never replicates all the aspects of the photograph. As argued by the photographic theorist Barbara Sabin, photography is a multipliable medium. able to multiply the image but unable to replicate all the material characteristics of the photograph as an object. Moreover, the case studies have shown how the establishment and the understanding on the state of the new reprinted photograph at the end is a subjective matter. And because of the subjectivity involved, reproduction needs a case-by-case engagement of the various stakeholders. I would like to acknowledge the colleagues and the artists, and the supervisor and the institution for the help I have received during my research. And here are the names listed of the colleagues and the institution. And I really want to thank you for your attention, and I hope you enjoyed my lecture. And now I will be live in order to answer possible questions. Bye bye.
Yes, and welcome. Hello, Monica Marchesi. Welcome live now here to the symposium. I have a question because all the examples you've given were from living artists with whom you could discuss in terms of reprinting, reproductions. How do you decide when the artist is dead?
Normally, if the artist is dead, you would go with and try to have a contact with the estate, if there is an estate, or the heirs of the artist. But it's a difficult question to answer if there are no instruction given by the artist before passing away. So that's true. That makes things a little bit more difficult. I don't know if that's enough.
So, but wouldn't it be helpful if there would be like international standards how to deal with such cases?
Yes, I think it will help. My experience it is also that artists tend to change their ideas during their life. So that's a little bit difficult to have very strict framework, but it would help during, for example, artist interviews to ask them what their position regarding reproduction is.
There's a question from our online audience. To which degree are signs of aging acceptable?
That depends. It's actually a case-by-case situation. It depends from the artist. There are some artists that are very, very concerned about color fading, for example, and do not accept any fading, and others are not so interested. And so that's. I don't think that you can have a big line, and you have to consider reproduction on a case-by-case level.
And from your personal point of view, how much patina should or could a work have?
Well, I find it a very difficult question because as a conservator, you normally tend to acknowledge patina as part of the work. But in my contact with the artist, I realized how they actually look at their work in a different way. So I actually try to respect their own point of view more than my point of view perspective. So if they say this is unacceptable, then I understand and acknowledge their request. What I try to do is to keep the older copy or the older version in the collection of the museum in order to have those older works part of the museum collection, at least as a study collection.
In terms of photography, of course, you have the problem that the material, the used material, depends on the photo industry. So should the institutions also hoard material?
I don't know, also because even if you, at least, well, what I've learned is that most of the artists with whom I worked, they are more interested in the aspect of the work rather than the physical aspect of the work. So if they can find the materials that enables them to reach the same, let's say, the same result, mostly of them are very happy. I know, but in the literature, that there are other artists that are very concerned and very strict in the use of their materials. So in that case, I'm not sure if they would allow reproduction. If you really want to have a silver dye bleach, because you think that silver dye bleach is the perfect technique, I don't think that they would allow reproduction as a preservation strategy, and they would probably acknowledge the fact that the work is aged.
Question from the audience.
Yes.
Do reference prints not change over time as well?
Yes, they do. The reason why Van der Kaap decided to keep the first version was because silver dye bleach is less prone to color fading than the chromogenic print that he printed the second time. So he thought in this case that keeping the light in the repository of the museum would enable him to have a better color reference than the chromogenic print.
And do you think it's possible to produce an exhibition print that cannot be different from the original?
No.
No.
No. That's, at least for me, it depends what you look for. The image perhaps may be the same, but the materials aspects of the photo are not, in my eyes, cannot be reproduced completely.
Thank you for clear no, and thank you for this talk, Monica Marchesi, and have a good day in Amsterdam.
Thank you for having me.
Warmest regards to the Stedelijk.
Yeah.